The courts, if they were to proceed without any check on their power, without any balance on their power, then we will start to see an undemocratic and frankly dangerous authoritarian expansion of power in the Supreme Court, which is what we are seeing now, from the overturning of abortion rights to the ruling that discrimination and frankly stripping the full personhood and dignity of LGBTQ people in the United States. These are the types of rulings that signal a dangerous creep towards authoritarianism and centralization of power in the court.
Look, I'm glad that AOC is, continuing to beat the drum for reform of the Supreme Court. Last week, if anyone somehow has forgotten, was really, really rough when it came to the Supreme Court. Not just in terms of what they did, but how they did it and what it means that they did it. Different rulings on affirmative action, attacking the LGBTQ community, getting rid of the student debt cancellation. The Supreme Court seems to understand what virtually everyone on the right understands, which is they can't legitimately win elections. People don't agree with their positions. They can't win over people, or they don't even care to try. And so, hey, we have the Supreme Court. Why win the Senate? Why not? Why get a bigger majority on the House? Why win a presidential race when we can just have them do everything we want? And that's what they're doing. I am as worried about it as AOC. Francesca, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a devastating blow. I think that for me, the one that stands out the most has got to be the right to discriminate against LGBTQ plus people, because it opens the door for all kinds of discrimination, hatred, violence against a community that already suffers it. I think affirmative action is huge, but I do think that colleges will continue to consider race, at least I hope, in their admissions, although again, it's bad precedent. But that one is just like, what the hell? What is actually going on? To say nothing of like the student loan debt relief, and to say nothing of the fact that this is all a grand plan from far right billionaire activists who've had their sights set on the courts for decades. And what has been the response over those decades from Democrats? That resounding silence is complacency. That resounding silence is Democrats having zero plan, but absolutely knowing that this has been going on for a very long time. So what the hell? What's the counterbalance? Speaking about checks and balances, having some sort of opposition is also a check and balance. Having a functioning party that can actively combat billionaire money is also a check and balance. So AOC is absolutely right. I always look at these and I'm frustrated by, again, the lack of defense. Don't even call it offense. Call it defense from the Democratic Party that saw this coming miles and miles and years away.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, like to the point where earlier this year, the judges weren't getting pushed through, because we had Feinstein just, I don't know, doing something, she's off somewhere, recovering or whatever. And from Biden's point of view, Biden, who at this point in his presidency already is reduced to hopefully getting judges passed. And that's pretty much it for what he's gonna get done. Because for him, executive orders, executive actions, he's super hesitant to do those things. He was just twiddling his thumbs. Didn't seem to particularly care that he wasn't getting the judges approved. Now, we appear to be back to that process happening. And look, to his credit, while we could certainly pick apart who these judges are, in raw numbers, he's gotten quite a few judges appointed. But in terms of having it as a focus of the party, like rhetorically really pushing for it, it isn't there talking about reform. We're highlighting AOC and we're gonna be highlighting others in a moment, because there are some in the Democratic Party that are pushing for reform to the court, making it more actually representative of the country. But for most centrist Democrats, it's not a big priority. And I want to be super clear before we move on. It's not a coincidence that it's not a big priority. It would be a focus if what the Supreme Court was doing was really bad from their point of view. From their actions, they clearly are not that bothered by what the Supreme Court is doing. And I trust their actions much more than their words. Anyway, with that said, let's move into a little bit more from AOC about her concerns over the Supreme Court.
As we've seen, not just in what we saw ruled from the majority, but even in the minority dissent written around these cases, we have justices saying that the Supreme Court is going themselves much too far. They are expanding their role into acting as though they are Congress itself. And that, I believe, is an expansion of power that we really must be focusing on. The danger of this court and the abuse of power in this court, particularly as it is related to the entanglements around conflicts of interest as well.
Yeah, and I'm glad that she mentions that, because we have all these different decisions where they're completely ignoring precedent. It is farcical, the arguments that they're making. The way that they now enshrined a right in the Constitution to discriminate against LGBTQ people is, well, I mean, I know that like they weren't even being asked to make this website, but don't worry, you can discriminate against them, but it's not who they are. It's like a thing that they did that you think is false. So, and you say that you're totally Christian, like you seem to really believe it. So I guess that's cool. So this definitely won't be able to be spread to discrimination against other groups, but that doesn't make any sense whatsoever. Like they're trying to be like, well, no, I mean, you wouldn't be able to ban like, an interracial couple from staying at your motel or whatever, because that's a group that they're in. Well, then you could just say, I have a deeply held religious belief that interracial marriage is wrong. Mm-hmm. Which is exactly as deeply held as the supposed belief that they have about same-sex marriage. So they have just opened the way for racial discrimination as well. Maybe they're okay with that. Maybe they think that they're avoiding that, but they're just making stuff up to justify discrimination that they want and to knock down social programs that they don't like. That's all that this is.
Yeah, and they're cherry picking the cases that will help them. I mean, they're cherry picking cases that should never have been elevated. I mean, how is this hypothetical circumstance of making a website for a gay couple, and by the way, like using people's names who didn't even know they were in this lawsuit to begin with, right? Like accusing them of submitting a request to your website company to like make a website for them when they absolutely didn't. That on its face should have been thrown out. Doesn't get thrown out. Handpicked by these, I guess, anointed, the most powerful people in our country who are not elected, but they are anointed with the help of the Senate, and of course with the help of, again, billionaire activists who've been planning their rise for a very long time now. I'm afraid is my internet crapping out on y'all?
Well, don't worry, it was a still frame, but it was a great one.
For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/The Damage Report. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.